So yeah, use it as a reminder that you're on the right path, and then you can turn that anxiety into excitement by getting excited about the possibilities and excited about your dedication to growth as a person.
Welcome to the Abundant Yogi Podcast. Our mission is to help you live your most happy, healthy, and abundant life possible. Inspired by yogic topics and philosophy, we share our own experiences navigating life and business as yogipreneurs. I'm Kagan Harvey, coming at you from Dubai.
And I'm Amethyst, coming at you from Canada. Here we'll talk about health, wellness, business, relationships, yoga, and everything in between that we believe help create and encompass a truly abundant life. Expect to have lots of laughs as we never take ourselves too seriously.
Whether you're a yoga teacher, practitioner, or just want to live a more abundant life, this is the podcast for you.
So get ready to open yourself up to new ideas, habits, and practices that will move you towards living your most abundant life.
So let's dive right into our episode on fear.
Sounds good.
I think a good place to start is just maybe going over what fear is and where does it come from. So, Amy, maybe I'll let you dive into that.
For sure. So the definition of fear is our emotional reaction to something that seems dangerous. So it's the threat of harm, whether real or imagined. Back in the caveman days, fear was necessary to tell us to respond immediately to a potential danger. So, like a lion that wants to eat us. And the fight or flight signals would help us respond quickly. So they'd raise our heartbeat and send blood to our muscles so we could run away or climb a tree or do whatever we need to do to get to safety. But nowadays, we don't have that potential danger all the time like we used to. So fear manifests differently or for different reasons. So it manifests as anxiety and things like being late for work, preparing to record a podcast, teaching a yoga class to other yoga teachers, and public speaking can all cause anxiety. Even though it's not going to kill us or physically hurt us like a wild animal could have, we still feel those same feelings that we would have felt back then. Yeah, so it's not so much that they're bad, like it's meant to protect us, but I mean, protecting us from teaching a yoga class isn't really, it's not totally necessary.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it stops us from doing scary things altogether, which is not great because, as we know, growth comes from pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zones.
Totally.
Yeah. So, Kagan, why else might someone experience fear and how can it stop us from fulfilling our dreams?
Yeah. So, kind of like you said, usually we experience fear as a learned reaction from something that maybe, caused us pain or was like a traumatic experience from our past. So that feeling of fear can stop us from making certain decisions in the future in quote unquote fear of reliving something we perceive might have that same traumatic effect. So, like, for example, something really common could be if you're in a relationship where your partner maybe cheated on you, you have a fear of trusting future partners, which causes you to then be closed off and avoid being vulnerable. So basically, that fear like stops you. And I mean, there's all kinds of different reasons that a person might feel fear. For example, fear of failure, feel of rejection, fear of rejection, fear of being alone, But really, all that fear is doing is stopping us from having experiences that the universe is putting in front of us that could potentially change our lives or direct us closer um, to our divine path. Like you said, I mean, like the fear itself doesn't actually stop you from achieving or being open or being vulnerable. It's what you do with that fear. It's if you give in to the fear or if you let that fear kind of overpower you, then is when it becomes an issue.
For sure. So, can you tell us about something scary that you've had to overcome?
Yes, I do. I do. And my example is actually somewhat fresh. And I say fresh because I feel like the last 3 years have gone by in a blur thanks to COVID. Um, but yeah, probably the biggest and most terrifying decision or thing that I've ever had to do was moving from Edmonton to Dubai. And of course, there's a lot of layers to this story that I will save and unpack in future episodes. But the Coles Notes version of the story is that in 2019, my company offered me a position in Dubai. And, the timing at that time couldn't have been more perfect. I mean, I just finished my second degree in university. My lease was up on my apartment. And coincidentally, I had also just gotten out of like a really toxic relationship. So, although in theory the decision seemed like a no-brainer, the thought of actually like packing up and leaving everything and everyone I'd ever known my entire life to move to the Middle East where I had never been. It was super far away from home, like a 27-hour flight. I knew nobody there aside from like one coworker who was going to be in the office. And truthfully, and please excuse my ignorance at this time, but like, as a Westerner, anytime someone says Middle East, I like it was like automatically associated with war zone. So, um, yeah, obviously I've learned since then, but neither here nor there. It was absolutely fucking terrifying. I had so many thoughts. So obviously, like, in making the decision, I'm like, hey, what are the things here that I need to consider? And like, I'm not gonna lie, FOMO was a big one. I was afraid that all my friends' lives are going to be going on and I'd miss out on things like Christmas, birthdays, and weddings and all of that, i.e., focusing on everyone else's lives rather than my own. Problem number one. Um, but yeah, I mean, there was the obvious ones, fear of being alone when I got there. But honestly, the biggest one was probably the fear of feeling guilty. Um, and what I mean by that is like I felt guilty for leaving my family behind. My mom had just gone through a major surgery that didn't go as planned. So I felt really awful leaving her behind, dealing with that. Both of my siblings have young kids. So, I was guilty about potentially missing out on seeing them grow up. Um, I had a really good or have a really good relationship with my dad. And when I was living in Edmonton, I saw him regularly. So I felt guilty about, taking that time away from him. I had also just gotten a new dog, my dog Daisy. I had just gotten her just before I was offered the position, actually. So, she was just getting used to me being her new mom. And I was going to now have to leave her with my sister for the time that I was moving to Dubai. Um, so yeah, I mean, all of these things, fear of all of that. But what it eventually came down to, and in fact, Amy, you gave me this advice, was to choose the bigger life. And, when I say bigger, obviously in this case, it's relative. I'm not saying in any way, shape, or form that my life here in Dubai is bigger or better than anyone else's life. Um, but what I mean is that I really had to just evaluate how my life was at that time and whether or not I was feeling fulfilled in what I was doing. So, I slept on it, I meditated on it, and ultimately the answer was no, I was not feeling fulfilled. So for me, the fear of the unknown and all the other fears associated with the move felt worth experiencing over staying back and continuing to feel uninspired and unfulfilled in the life that I was living. So Yeah, I mean, I felt in my gut that this was, the opportunity came to me for a reason. I put my full trust in my intuition and just decided to do it. I trusted that no matter what the outcome was, that I was going to be okay. And no matter what, I would grow, I would learn, I would expand, and trusting that, letting go and allowing the universe to have my back would guide me closer to my divine path. And boy, did it ever have my back. Um, yeah, it's crazy how fast things start to just fall into place when you let go of fear and trust that everything will be okay, which I think that is maybe one topic that we can discuss further in another episode.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that is like one of the most scary times, biggest decision of my life. Um, and yeah, I really just leaned in and trusted that everything was going to be okay. And look at me now.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And think if you didn't um make that decision, like you probably would have never done your teacher training.
Yeah,
You wouldn't have met your now fiance.
exactly. Like all of these things just fell into place once I made that decision to just trust.
Hmm.
Totally.
Awesome.
Yeah. What about you? What's the scariest thing you've ever
Um,
had to overcome, and how did you do it?
well, I don't know what the scariest would be, but it's just this constant, like, always trying to put myself out of my comfort zone, I
Yeah.
guess. So, like, I talked a bit about last episode is just my fear of teaching yoga
Yeah.
in the beginning. I was terrified,
Yeah.
but I
Because
kept
it is.
push yeah, I just kept pushing myself to do it. And I mean, I still get scared sometimes, like if a certain person might be in my class that just like, you know how there's some people that you just don't know if they enjoy it or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
Totally.
just like seem so serious all the
I had
time.
one like that in my class tonight, but I mean, obviously, I think she enjoys it because she keeps coming back and
Yeah,
she's been coming
exactly.
back, but it's just like that little bit of like fear where
Yeah.
you're like, mm.
There's actually this one guy at this yoga studio I used to teach at where as soon as Shavasana like ended, as soon as we said namaste to the whole class, he
He'd
would just
leave.
like he'd stand up and like lift his mat up like as loud as possible and just walk out the door. But like every yoga teacher said that he did the same thing in their class. So
Yeah.
it was funny.
Yeah.
Anyways,
There's
that's
all
a
kinds.
side tangent. Yeah. So I'll just give an example. I have something coming up next month. It's an event, fundraiser for a charity, and I'm teaching a yoga class there.
Oh, I so
And
wish I could come to that.
and it's if I sell the tickets out, which I'm
You will.
yes, I
We're not
will.
operating on a lack mentality. We're operating on manifesting.
Then it'll definitely be the largest yoga class I've ever taught and like the biggest event I've ever put on myself.
So cool.
And yeah, so I'm like nervous about it, but I'm just taking it one day at a time,
Yeah.
focusing on selling the tickets. And obviously, I'm still going to do it. I'm not going to sell these tickets and then not show up to the event because I'm too nervous.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah, sometimes it
so
just takes pushing through,
yeah, exactly.
but you're
Just
gonna
do
do
it.
great.
Should we get into our 7 tips to overcoming fear?
Totally.
All right. So I guess I'll start.
Yeah, and
So,
maybe this should be prefaced with the fact that this is like this is our experience. And I mean, there's probably a million other ways and maybe different ways that work better for individual people, but from our experience, this is what's worked for us. Yeah?
for sure.
Yeah.
So, tip number one that I came up with is turning anxiety into excitement. So when you understand that you have to push yourself outside of your comfort zone if you want to grow and succeed, you'll start to get very familiar with this anxious or nervous feeling. And you can actually start to train yourself to recognize it as a good thing. So a lot of times when I'm um like planning that event or even just like sometimes reaching out to people on Instagram, I might be like feel nervous about it, but I just remember that that's like a normal feeling and I try to think of it as a sign that I'm on the right path, basically.
Yeah. And you're like doing it to serve yourself a better purpose.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, use it as a reminder that you're on the right path, and then you can turn that anxiety into excitement by getting excited about the possibilities and excited about your dedication to growth as a person.
Yeah. Love it. Love it. It's a good one. Um, the next one that I have, and very relative to what I went through and the story that I shared, was that just trust that everything will be okay, no matter what the outcome is. Like, stop assuming that the outcome will be negative. Change your narrative. Trust that whatever happens is an opportunity for you to expand and grow, like you just mentioned. And like, trust that the universe has your back and that your experience will provide you insight or intel on what works for you and maybe what doesn't. And trust that the opportunity you're being presented with is meant for you. Like, if there's anything that I've learned through my experiences, is that nothing is a coincidence. Like, things happen for a reason. So if you're being presented with an opportunity and your gut is telling you to go for it, have that trust. Have that trust.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. So my next tip is instead of being afraid of failing or rejection, be afraid of what could happen if you don't try at all. So let's say that you're stuck at a job that you hate and you would really like to start living your passion, whatever that might be, but you're afraid to take that risk and make that jump. I would just imagine what your life would be like if you stayed at that job. Probably you'd be miserable. And then imagine what could happen if you took the risk and followed your passions. Like, sure, there might be bumps along the road, but wouldn't you rather like die knowing that you actually tried and gave it your best shot instead of always wondering what could have happened? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. And actually, that kind of jumps into your practice of manifestation. Like, when you're manifesting what you want, you're actually thinking about how it feels to have the job you want, how it feels to have the life that you want to live. So, just as much as, you're thinking about the life that you don't want to have, to imagine, okay, like to use that as a, I guess, as a um, like stepping stone to get over your fear, you're also manifesting the life that you want by putting yourself in that situation. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I think we'll also have another episode on like manifestation. That's a good one.
Oh yeah, we have lots of episodes up the sleeve.
Sods. Yeah, good one. Love it.
So
Uh,
Kagan, what's point number or tip number 4?
yeah, so my next tip, and this kind of ties into your first one, in regards to just like getting familiar with the feeling, but practice makes perfect. Um, the more that you experience having to make those scary decisions or like doing things that you're afraid of, or, experiencing things that cause you fear, the more that you put yourself in that situation, the easier they become. And like, when you go through, for example, when you go through one scary thing, like I went through moving to Dubai, you start to build that confidence that you can get through more scary things. So,
Mhm.
like I said, once I made that leap, then each decision that I had to make, okay, of course, there were still a lot of hard decisions and a lot of things that were scary and, caused me fear. But like the more that I put myself through that, the easier it was to actually make those decisions. And you don't get so caught up on the, oh my God, what if this doesn't work out? Like you just kind of build that confidence. So
Yeah.
yeah, just
So it's
practice.
it's basically like it's evidence
Yeah,
because
exactly.
you've done it before and it's worked out, so you
Yeah,
know you can do it again.
totally. Like you're showing yourself, yeah, I can do this. I got this.
Yeah. So
Um,
tip,
yeah.
oh, were you
I
done?
was I was just gonna say, what's your next one?
Oh. So tip number 5 is understanding that failures are just learning lessons. So one thing that I've noticed is um, a lot of like successful people will say that it's not that they don't fail, it's that they've failed many times. And that they kind of owe their success to all their failures. So every time that you have a failure or a bump in the road or a challenge, you learn something from that.
Mhm.
So I think just reminding yourself that, like if you're afraid to do something, that even if the worst possible outcome did come from that, um, like you're gonna get something from it. I
Yeah,
mean, right?
totally. I think that ties into just like, yeah, changing the narrative on what happens if the outcome isn't what you expected. Like, don't
Mhm.
expect that it's going to be a negative thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, every like failed business is teaches you how to do better in your next business.
Oh, 100%. Like, yeah, for sure. I mean, I just
Mhm.
hosted my first group sound healing event over the weekend. And, because I'm thinking positively, it was a success. I mean, I had not as many people as I thought would join. It was 5 people, but I'm not looking at it as like, oh my God, I failed. I'm looking at it as like, oh, thank God, I got that first one done. Now I can take all those learning opportunities from that first experience and then use that towards my next one. So I think yeah,
Exactly.
like how you choose to narrate. I keep using the word narrate. I can't think of another word right now because it's like 9:30 at night and I've been at it since 6 a.m. But um, yeah, how you choose to, I guess, associate with the outcome is huge.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, this goes a little bit more into positivity than fear, but like someone might have looked at your thing like, oh, only 5 people came. Like what a failure.
Yeah.
That sucks. But you chose to look at it, like this is my first one. That's a great
Yeah. Glass
proud
half full,
and
baby.
yeah. And it's just practicing because every time you teach it, you're gonna get better and better at it.
Totally. Oh yeah,
All right,
absolutely.
what's our next one, Cakes?
So the next one that I put was stop caring what other people think. And that doesn't mean that you need to be a selfish little asshole, but it means that you make decisions for yourself and what's best for you rather than catering to someone else's needs. And this is one
Hmm.
that I think so many people, myself included, have got stuck on. So many times I've made decisions based on what someone else might think. And every single time I've done that, I have been disappointed or unhappy with the outcome of that decision. So you need to trust yourself and make the and honor yourself enough and value yourself enough that you know what you need. And if what you need is different from someone else's needs, I mean, who cares? Like, go with what works for you. Yeah, there's a line to be drawn. Generally speaking, stop caring what people think. Do what is in your heart and what works best for you. And I can, again, tie this into my example, like that guilt that I felt leaving my family. You know, some of my family members obviously were extremely supportive of my move. Some of my family members, you know, weren't so excited. And I could have let their opinions and what they thought, you know, stop me from moving. And had I done that, I would have really, really seriously regretted it. So I think, you know, it's really important that you just, you know, put your blinders on when you need to make a decision for yourself and think about what it is that works best for you and not anyone else.
100%. And even like your example is like a big example, but it was making me think of just like when I post something to Instagram.
Yeah.
Like before, I used to overthink everything and be like, oh my God, this is so cringe.
Yeah.
I mean, I just started saying cringe, but like, because I would worry what other people were going to think.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
I realized it's actually funny because it's usually those posts that you're like afraid to post that end up
getting the most traction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like
so
that
funny
sound that's going around or used to, and it's like, who cares if you're cringe? Like, no one cares.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. People don't really care as much as we probably think that they care.
I know. It's so true. I think we get caught up in that a lot. It's like, you know, or if you say something and you're like, oh shit, why did I say that? They probably think I'm so stupid. Yeah. And you like overanalyze it, and like that person is not thinking about what you just said. Like that person is like nowhere near even thinking about it. So just fucking let it go.
I struggle with that one. Like after a social interaction, I'll be like,
yeah,
my God, why did I say that? And I'll like think about it for like a week.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It gets yeah.
All right.
You have one more, I think.
Yes, my last tip is pretty straightforward. And so tip number 7 for overcoming fear is that you don't. You just do things scared.
Yeah.
So all of these tips that we've talked about might help you like change your mindset a little bit and just help push you outside of your comfort zone. But likely you're still going to be scared to do things.
Yep.
And you just gotta, you know, bite the bullet and just do it.
Totally. And it gets easier. It gets easier.
For sure.
Those are our
Hopefully,
tips. Yeah.
Hopefully you can take some of these and apply them in your life.
Absolutely. And we would love to hear about your experiences. So if you have any, you know, experiences that you want to share, or if any additional tips that you have on overcoming fear, feel free to leave them in the comments. If you know, felt like you got something from this episode, please shoot us a like, maybe share the episode with a friend.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you as always for tuning in, and
we'll see you next week.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Abundant Yogi podcast. This podcast allows us to step into our passion of helping others, so we hope that you can take away from what we share and be inspired to bring abundance into your own life because you deserve it.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe or follow and leave us a review. Leaving a review helps us become more discoverable for other people on the path of living more abundantly. Once again, we thank you and wish you so much love. Until next time.